Hello, fifth grade. This is our video looking at possessive nouns, which is the topic of chapter 8 in our grammar books. And I know what you've been thinking. I haven't heard Mr. Francis read it for a long time, so I'm going to read through this for you, and we'll pause at a couple points to have some comments that I will add. This is on page 141 in your book if you do not already have it open. So from the start. Have you ever thought of all the different roles or parts you play every day all at the same time? For example, if you're a boy, you're also a son, a grandson, or even a brother or a nephew. And if you're a girl, you're a daughter, a granddaughter, or possibly a sister or a niece. Maybe you're not only a student, but you're also a quarterback, a pianist, or a scout. The same person can have many roles depending on where they are and who they're with and what they are doing. Similarly, a noun can have different roles in a sentence depending on the words around it and where it is placed in a sentence. Think of what a noun does. It always names a person, a place, a thing, a quality, or an idea, but it can have different grammatical roles within a sentence. A noun can be the subject of a sentence. It can also be the direct object, completing the action verb. In this chapter, you will learn about another way that a noun functions. A noun can show possession or ownership. Then it is called a possessive noun. Even though it is a noun, a possessive noun behaves like an adjective because it modifies another noun, usually answering the question whose. Whose little brother is in that photograph? He is Eden's little brother. Whose frisbee is in Chip's mouth? It is Max's frisbee. It's useful. I'm going to pause here for the first time. A noun can be the subject, or it can be the direct object. Another thing it can do is show possession. All right, moving on to ideas to understand. In the English language, nouns can be divided into three groups depending on how they behave, or their role in a sentence. Each of these groups is called a case, which is a grammatical term that describes a special function of a noun. A noun's case shows its relationship to other words in a sentence. There are three noun cases. Let's look at those. In the subjective or nominative case, a noun does the action. Your nice little hint here is that that's when it is the subject of the sentence. So when it's subjective or nominative, it's the noun. In the objective case, a noun receives the action. Got another nice little hint there. Object. Think about a direct object that receives the action. And then the third option is in the possessive case, which is when a noun possesses something. And obviously you've got the word possess in possessive. So all three of them kind of tell you what kind of noun it is. This is also worth noting. Although pronouns can be divided into the same three cases, we will discuss them later in this series, so next year or in a different book. You may not have used the terms subjective case or objective case before, but you have identified many of both kinds of nouns in your analysis of subjects, subjective, and direct objects, objective, in sentences. This lesson focuses on identifying possessive nouns, nouns that show ownership. A noun in the possessive case stands out because of an apostrophe, which is a little floating thing right there. Howard Pyle uses one in this passage from The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood, in which the Sheriff of Nottingham nearly has his head pierced with an arrow. Can you identify the word that is in the possessive case? And before we go into this, just as a quick reminder, as we talk about identifying nouns and sentences, remember that there are, I've got my whiteboard, you have parts of speech. And you also have parts of a sentence. And these are similar but different. Parts of speech, what that means is it a noun? Is it a verb? Is it an adjective? Is it an adverb? So noun, is it a pronoun? Is it a verb? Is it a conjunction? Many different ways to identify something. But then you also have parts of a sentence. Parts of a sentence include the subject, the direct object, the predicate. Sometimes these sound like the same vocabulary, right? We've got verbs and you've got predicate verbs. Nouns are often subjects, but sometimes a pronoun can be the subject. And so as we talk about looking at nouns and what part of speech it is, sometimes a noun is the subject. Sometimes it's a noun, which is part of speech, but instead it's the direct object, different part of the sentence. Or it can even be an adjective in the sentence. So different parts of speech can be different parts of a sentence. So as we look at the different cases, it's important to remember that's why this is, we're learning about different things that nouns can be. All right, now back to the reading this passage from Howard Pyle. "Stand back, Sheriff," cried Little John, and even as he spoke, a bugle horn sounded shrilly, and a cloth-yard shaft whistled within an inch of the sheriff's head. So where is the possessive noun? Look for the apostrophe. The possessive noun is sheriff's. If you're looking for sheriff, there it is. You see that apostrophe. Instead of saying the head of the sheriff, the author writes the sheriff's head. Would that make sense? Shrilly and a cloth-yard shaft whistled within an inch of the head of the sheriff. Yeah, that also makes sense, but how much better does sheriff's head sound? It means that the head being threatened by the arrow is owned by the sheriff. When a noun is in the possessive case, it functions as an adjective, and it modifies another noun. Whose head? It's the sheriff's head. We treat a possessive noun like an adjective when we analyze or diagram. Unlike adjectives, though, possessive nouns can be modified by other adjectives. The sheriff's head, the merry men's forests. So in these sentences, the is actually describing which merry men or which sheriff, the sheriff's head. So it's confusing because sometimes these adjectives, it feels like, are describing other adjectives. To create a possessive noun, you always add an apostrophe, but sometimes you also add the letter S after the apostrophe, and sometimes you don't. And how do you know when to add the S after the apostrophe? So if we look, for example, here, the head of the sheriff, we add that S here, right? When do we normally add an S at the end of a word? Well, when we make it plural, right? There's a pen, there are pens, so we add the S there. But if I say the pen's grip, there aren't multiple pens here. It's the grip that belongs to this pen. So I add an S to make it possessive. If I said the pen's caps, it already has the S at the end because it's making it plural. So I would just write pens or something after it. Look at this example. The target of the archers, or the archer's target. If there was just one archer, instead I would write it like that. The archer's target, with the apostrophe between the R and the S. But when it's plural, so there's multiple archers, it's the archers with an apostrophe there at the end to show that it belongs to multiple archers. So if the noun doesn't end in S, you have to add an S and then the apostrophe. But if it's plural, you actually just put the apostrophe at the end. Now what if it's a word that actually ends with an S already? Look here, class. The library of the class, the class's library. It already ends in an S, but that S is part of the word. Or this one, the Book of Otis. I wouldn't rename that Odi and then an S. That'd be Odi's book. But it's still Otis. So it needs to be Otis and then add an S. Or think about like Jesus. It's Jesus is disciples. So that's why we add an S and then the apostrophe. Okay? So this also says that, but to read through it. In addition to classifying nouns by subjective cases, objective cases, and possessive cases, you can classify them according to other roles they play. They can either be singular, which is naming just one person, place, or thing, or plural, naming more than one. Pen versus pens. They can be either proper or common. Common nouns name any noun, while proper nouns name particular nouns and have capitalized first letters. So this is a dog, so I just call it dog. But if this dog's name is Loki, I'm going to capitalize it with an L first. So in this example, did you notice that the passage from The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood include both common and proper nouns? So horn, arrow, and head, those are all common nouns. I'm not naming a specific one. Sheriff, Little John, and Robin Hood, though, are proper nouns because it's naming particular people. Also worth noting, this is a little bit confusing. Sheriff can be a job description, so sheriff is not always a proper noun. But in the story of Robin Hood, there's a specific person that is the sheriff, and that's kind of his name. So when we're referring to this sheriff, we'd capitalize it. But if we said there's a sheriff in town, that one wouldn't be capitalized. But names like Little John and Robin Hood are always proper. Singular or plural, common or proper, any type of noun can be in any of the three cases, the cases being subjective, objective, or possessive. An especially interesting set of nouns that function in different ways are the proper nouns naming days: Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. The days of the week can be in any of the three cases. Monday is the longest day. Monday is the subject, so it's subjective. We love Friday. Friday is the direct object, so it's objective. Tuesday's child is full of grace. Tuesday's possessive of child, so it's possessive. They are always proper nouns, so their first letter are always capitalized, even when they're plural, such as my favorite days are Sundays. The abbreviation of proper nouns can have capitalized first letters too. Meet Robin on Mon. December 8th. So you can see that even though I abbreviated Monday down to MON, you'd still need to capitalize the M there. These proper nouns for the days of the week have mythological origins. Do you know what the days are named after? Or find out in the poem at the end of this chapter, which is something that we'll look at later, as well as analyzing and diagramming sentences on Thursday. For now, though, that's all we need to do in grammar. I did also send you an email, though, with corrections from your quiz. So please do any corrections with your quiz that are needed and email them to me or put them in the Dropbox. If you have any questions about this, we'll have a chance to talk through them during our Zoom call today. Otherwise, I will see you then.